Very good. Now we come to the point in the meeting where we are going to have our discussion entitled Teenagers and Vaping, presented by the Morris Township Police Department, Daytop Village, and the Morris Township Health Department. So let me turn it over to Chief again.
Thank you.
All right, good evening, everyone, again. Thank you for coming, Mayor Grazel, Township Committee. Thank you for giving the opportunity to the Police Department to present this presentation on what we've all figured is going to be a very important topic. Some of you may be opposing to it, some of you may be in favor to it. We're here tonight really to not necessarily push this on you, but to give you all the facts so everyone can make a good, solid, educated decision when it comes to either supporting or not supporting the ordinance. So again, this evening, let me introduce myself. I'm Chief Mark DiCarlo, Morris Township Police Department. And let me further just introduce you to Mark DiCarlo, the father of 3 daughters out in the Long Valley school system. One is a 4-year-old, one is a 13-year-old 8th grade girl, and the other is a 15-year-old freshman. The reason why I tell you that is because I think it's important for you to know that I would never present anything that would necessarily harm anyone else's children if I wasn't willing to support it myself as a father. We really have a lot of good presenters this evening. I certainly came with the people to support us as to why this is important, and I'd like to introduce them. Who I brought with me, Lieutenant Gloglich, Heather Gloglich from the Morris Township Police Department, has been very imperative in helping assist this ordinance. We have Kathy Whitehead from the Morris Township Health Department, she's our nurse. We have Ellie Pluto, who is the Substance Use Navigator for the Department of Children and Families for State New Jersey. We have Jessica Mondino, who is the Youth Services Coordinator of the Morris County Department of Human Services. Again, in the pamphlet, there's 4 pages. It's very informative. We ask you that you just allow us to go through it. As you see on the first page of the agenda, after I'm done with my introduction, Ellie is going to give a really good presentation, about 10 minutes, on really what vaping is and what these electronic nicotine delivery systems are and what the dangers are, and specifically the dangers to someone that's under the age of 25, really when someone's brain is still developing. We're talking about nicotine. It has been identified as one of the top 5 most addictive substances, right there with alcohol, amphetamines, cocaine, and heroin. All right, same top 5. The creation of this ordinance really on the police department is a proactive approach. I really see it a proactive approach, utilizing holistic means and measures, and almost somewhat of a therapeutic mean and measure to address this problem. As I said before, I wouldn't want to see my child be brought into a court system or introduced negatively to law enforcement, and they're not going to be in Morris Township if this ordinance passes. Again, there is proof that shows when a child is introduced negatively into the court system or into the justice system with law enforcement, that it does negatively affect that child as they grow. But there's also good statistics and research to support that when the child is supported by law enforcement and education and has a positive experience with law enforcement, that also proves to be a benefit, a benefit to the children as well. And that's what we're looking to do here. Right off the bat, let me answer some questions. This will not criminalize your children. All right, so in the state of New Jersey, juveniles, anyone under the age of 18, so 17 and below. With our ordinance, any juvenile, again, if it's passed, any juvenile that's found in possession of these devices with nicotine or smokeless tobacco will not be entering the court system. All right, we're going to get to that later. But again, I know there's people here that might be concerned about this. This will in no way criminalize your children. It will in no way introduce a juvenile into the court system. It also will not affect what people might believe is a juvenile record. So this will not go on someone's record, quote unquote. There's also state law, which we're going to go over, Lieutenant Gloglich is going to go over, which protects the information of a juvenile and is considered confidential. All right, so I know there's probably 2 big things. We are going to expand on them and touch on them. But again, this will in no way criminalize your children. This will in no way affect them for college applications and will not go on their police records. And any juvenile reports that the police write or has your child's name in do not go anywhere outside of the police department. Kelly.
Right. So before we get started, I have to say I'm a clinician by trade. So as a trained clinician, what they do in school is they work on not making decisions for other people. You know, our main purpose is to help people come to their own decision on their own. So when I talk about vaping, when I talk about these controversial topics, facts only, no opinions based. So today what I'm just going to be doing is giving the general facts about what we know about vapes and really what's going on in the brain of our adolescents, because that's about what we're most concerned about right now from a public health point of view. So quickly today, let's see if it will work for us. So we have to talk about electronic nicotine delivery systems. So when we use the word vape, we use the word Juul, mod, box ends. We're all talking about the same thing. It's a device that has generally a liquid nicotine in it. It's heated up by a coil, and what's breathed in through a mouthpiece is just an aerosol. So what's really confusing is a lot of people use the word vapor, vaporizers, but it's not a water vapor by any means. It's actually an aerosol. What we're finding out through lab testing and different services is that that aerosol actually contains things like formaldehyde. That's what we use to preserve dead bodies, nickel, lead, things that are made with bug spray. A lot of things we don't want in our youth and young adults' lungs. Here are some different devices. So what you can see on the side is they go anywhere from looking like a general cigarette to looking like a flash drive to looking like, I don't know, that kind of looks like a toy to me. But they're all doing the same thing. And what they're doing is we have, this would be an electronic cigarette that's cut in half. So we have a battery, we have the coil, and what's going to happen is there's a liquid in it. So that liquid is brought to a boiling temperature. Once it's brought to that boiling temperature, the youth or young adult or whoever is going to be using this device would be able to breathe in that aerosol. And that aerosol not only contains nicotine, but also permits nicotine, which means there are both second and third hand vapors that contain nicotine that are coming from these electronic cigarettes. So if a youth or young adult is not using them, but however is in proximity to someone who is using, it can not only get that nicotine on their skin, but their clothing as well. Has anybody heard about the Monitoring the Future study? Nobody? So I'm a huge data person. I love numbers, but I'm not going to bore you with a bunch of numbers because I think that might only be entertaining to me. But basically what we're seeing is that from 2017 to 2018, our reports have gone up by 50%. This study goes out about the entire United States. They go to a bunch of different high schools and they take surveys on what our youth are using, how they're using it, how they're getting it. And it looks at, that really helps us create our prevention and our different policy measures and within the school system. And we're seeing alarming things. Specifically we can talk about in 2017, a survey went out on what is actually in these devices. And what our youth said is that about 60% believe that they were just inhaling flavoring. So when we look at a e-juice, which is what they would call the liquid that's within an electronic nicotine delivery system, there's no ingredients. Because it's not approved by the FDA, it's just listed as flavoring. So within that flavoring, that's where we're seeing the formaldehyde, the lead, and the nickel. About 25 believed that they were just inhaling nicotine. Another 10 reported that they had no idea what was going into their system. And about 10% believed that they were inhaling marijuana. So that's incredibly concerning because we don't know what's going into their systems. They don't know what's going into their systems. And as we're learning more about these devices, they can easily be taken apart, re-administered with different liquids that could be incredibly toxic to their bodies. We also have to look at the delivery rates. Right now we're seeing that, as with traditional cigarettes, if you're smoking, if you think of a traditional cigarette that you would light up, there's a light at the bottom of it. So the more you inhale that cigarette, the smaller it's going to get. So eventually you're going to stop or you're going to burn your finger. With electronic nicotine delivery systems or vapes or Juuls, there's no buzzer, there's no light, there's no vibration that happens to say you've now smoked one full cigarette or what would equal to one full cigarette. So what's really concerning is that our youths are inhaling, and all of a sudden their entire vape pod is empty. They're 20 cigarettes in after that, and they have no idea. And they're going through these pods throughout school days. They're having to leave school to go get more pods, and all of a sudden, one day, 2 packs of cigarettes is gone in their system. They have no idea. That actual sensation of once I complete that cigarette, my hand's going to burn if I keep going, it's not there. We're also seeing some dosage problems going on, and that's the same thing, that with our, even if we're trying to talk about our nicotine, what we're seeing in our electronic nicotine delivery systems is an incredibly higher level of nicotine than traditional cigarettes. Main difference between a traditional cigarette and a electronic cigarette is tobacco. So electronic cigarettes do not contain tobacco, but they do contain nicotine. That's our major difference. All those carcinogens, those cancer-causing chemicals that we see in traditional cigarettes are still there in our electronic cigarettes. We are seeing higher levels of nicotine provided through nicotine salts. So that's even higher than a cigarette, and a lot of our youth talk about they love that rush that's coming from them. And that's because bigger bang for the nicotine, more nicotine going to their system and hitting the blood-brain barrier at a lot faster rates. This is just a visual to show what I was talking about earlier. About 20 cigarettes is about 1 vape pod. So we know it takes about 5 Juul pods, which are the really tiny squares, to lead to a full-blown nicotine addiction. I think they're sold in about 4 per pack. So 1 vape pack, 1 Juul pack, you're 90% there to a full-blown nicotine addiction. All it takes is 5 to have a complete brain dopamine, full-blown nicotine addiction. That's a lot of things, and they're going through maybe 1, 2 a day. It's less than a week. What's really concerning is that we don't have the research to back up what do we do once our youth are addicted to nicotine. Right now, our patches, our gums, they're made for adults who are over 18. Smoking cessation programs, we're seeing them in residential treatment programs because our youth, our families, they don't know how to get their youth to stop using these. And once the brain and the dopamine has already affected their hippocampus and their frontal lobe, it's set in stone, and it's leading to damage that we can't really replace. We can learn and we can teach coping skills, but once that damage is done to that dopamine and that frontal lobe, it takes a lot of work and a lot of commitment to bring it back to regular homeostasis. Right here, it just talks about our brain and really what we're seeing, and it's coming at an alarming rate. This is something that we're seeing in the schools, and if you think about it, with dependence comes withdrawal. You can't have one without the other. And it takes about, after one person, your last hit of an electronic cigarette or even a traditional cigarette, it takes about 30 minutes for withdrawal symptoms to set in. So if you think about it, if you're at school, we have a youth who's taking maybe, like the SAT test. They're like 4 hours? So after those, maybe you walk into the test, you take your last hit of your vape, you go and you sit down, and about 30 minutes in, you're starting to experience those symptoms. You have agitation, the anxiety, the nausea, the stomach issues. Right now, our youth, they don't know how to cope. They don't know those symptoms. And what we're seeing is that they're associating them with stress. So it's not stress that they're truly experiencing. What they're experiencing is a withdrawal symptom. Those coping skills to treat the withdrawal symptoms and to treat the stress that they're experiencing have not yet been developed. This talks a little bit more about just what we're seeing in the brain. I only have 10 minutes, so I'm going to go pretty fast. So one thing I do want to show you is an actual video clip of some youth. I believe they were from Syracuse, New York, and started with a young male who said, "I'm addicted to the Juul. This, I can't stop using." He got a couple of his friends together who were also using it. It talks a little bit about what they're actually experiencing and what they think contributed to that addiction. And I think it's really talks a lot about the flavoring of the devices, and it's worthwhile to take a look.
Whatever, but then like he gave me a couple days to think about why to do it, and in those next 2 days, I just looked around and I see that all of my friends, all of my best friends are addicted to nicotine.
Where's this guy? I think I started Juul probably end of sophomore year, so that'd be about last year or last summer, and yeah, all of the people in my grade started using it. My name is Jack Solomon. I'm 15 years old, and I am a Juul user. We got them from ridiculous. It's amazing. And I was like, I gotta show all my friends what this thing is. There have been times in the past where I've been drooling during class, and I've drooled pretty much every moment where I wasn't in class. I think that kids leaving school desperately needing pods happens a lot, and it shouldn't happen, but kids are very addicted to these e-cigarettes and need the stuff to be satisfied. People will go during class, people will go to the bathroom, people will go between classes, people go in the car while they're driving home, pretty much any moment where they can be away from the eyes of parents, they'll just be drooling and like all day. Certain people will go through a full pod a day, which is like about the same nicotine content as a pack of cigarettes.
Hi, my name is Margarita, and I'm 14 years old, and I use the Juul. Sometimes during class, like, I'll leave, like, if I get really stressed, like, it's kind of like my go-to, like, I kind of need it. It's just a part of my life now that, like, I know it's bad, but I can't stop.
I'm Sylvia, and I'm 14, and I've been using the Juul for 9 months. When I'm doing my homework every night, I'll be writing, and then all of a sudden I'll want a Juul rip, and I'll have my pencil in my right hand and my Juul in my left.
Some of my friends have tried using cigarettes, and it's because they have been juuling, because they're so used to juuling, that they just think it's okay to use cigarettes.
If you banned most of the flavors, like fruit flavors or just like food flavors, I think that not as many kids would try it because it's not as like appealing.
If there were no flavors, kids would not be as attracted to these Juuls. Banning e-liquids would force a lot of kids to make the right choice. I for sure think that.
There's a message to all people who think that personal freedoms trump public health. You're gonna let kids get really sick if this continues. I guarantee the amount of nicotine that's going to these kids' system will result in some bad. I just can't see how it won't, and something's gotta happen soon. Something's gotta happen soon.
So I really like to end on that, especially because we have a little bit of a shorter time today. But where it's like priceless. You know, they talk about how this tool, this piece of equipment that's giving them this great nicotine head rush is priceless. And just unfortunately right now what we're seeing in the adolescent brain is that it's not developed in us to show us things like lung cancer and popcorn lung aren't priceless. The right now is priceless for them, but what we don't have in that developmental mindset is the after effect. And we are seeing things like popcorn lung, like cancer come from these. We're seeing them blow up in people's faces and have lifelong damage and needing, reconstructive surgery. But that stuff isn't instantaneous, and that stuff doesn't, really articulate in an adolescent or a youth's brain. And that's why this is so important. So for today, I'll end on that. Just hopefully it gave everyone something to think about and really opened one or two eyes about what we're really seeing and how dangerous these devices are. Okay.
So we're going to open it up for public questioning in a second, but I do have two questions for you myself, just from the video. One, there was a graphic that said you can purchase it at 18, but that graphic must be from a different state, because in New Jersey it's 21.
So it was created in Syracuse, New York.
Okay, so just a clarification, in New Jersey it's 21. The second question I have for you is you talk about the adolescent brain, and the reading I've done is that the adolescent brain is more addicted, it can be addicted more easily because it's not developed. At what age does the brain fully develop?
So science is, it's constantly evolving and changing, and what we see right now is that the brain doesn't stop developing until age 25. And what we know is that the adolescent brain does become more addicted to substances compared to a mature 25 and older brain. And we see that because of the dopamine surge, when we do something good, our brain releases dopamine. So when we eat, feels good, it releases dopamine. When we do something like, punch ourselves in the face, no dopamine. When we start using substances, that hierarchy of needs of what feels good and what doesn't feel good, it starts to shift. When we use substances at younger rates, that dopamine surges, and it's harder to get those substances on our lower hierarchy of needs than the higher. So things that are important to us, like eating, drinking, water, sleeping, exercise, start to get lower on our list of needs, and those substances start to feel a lot higher. Almost as high as that if you wouldn't use that substance, that you would even die. So we really are seeing it. So you could use the word gateway substance or something like that. But I can tell you as a clinician who's been working with adults for years, I've never had a client, of my clients were very late in their stage of addiction and using heroin. Not a single one has told me, Miss Ellie, I've never smoked a cigarette before, or I've never used marijuana before. Might be might be correlated, might not be, but it just seems to be something that's in common. So I think only time will tell on if we really see a true correlation or not.
Great, thank you. Turn it back over to you, Chief.
Yes, so we still have a little bit more presentation.
Yes. Sorry to interrupt you there, I just wanted clarification on those two
Oh,
points.
that's okay, sir. Yep. I'm just letting them know they ain't leaving yet. Before I turn it over to Lieutenant Gloglich, just if you go to the back page of the first page, the lieutenant's going to go over the ordinance. She's then going to go over what we have in place right now in the state of New Jersey under state statute for what regulates the sale of the products. A little bit about the locations in Morris Township that we've identified that sell these products and what we've done already. Then on the next page after that is Title 26, which is really the Safe Air Act, we're calling it, which prohibits and regulates the smoking inside a building, and it actually does incorporate the smokeless tobacco and the nicotine delivery systems. And then after that, that's when we then go our plan on how we were going to handle juvenile offenders and adult offenders, and then the confidentiality of those reports that we talked about and what a station house adjustment is. Okay, Lieutenant.
Hi everyone, how are you? You can answer, it's okay. So let me just talk to you a little bit about myself, just because I really do like that the chief talked about that he was a dad of 3. So I'm a mom of 5. So my oldest is 19. I have a 12-year-old, an 11-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 3-year-old. And the 19-year-old, just so you understand a little bit that I do understand what it's like, my 19-year-old only started living with us about a year ago. Her father passed away when he was 16, and she came to live with our family. And she came to me already addicted to Juuls. So I see the physical effects of it on her. I see how she sneaks out. I see how it's affected her school. I've seen a ton of stuff, and she actually goes to University of Hartford, where it's 18. You can buy it there, just like in New York. And we go back and forth. And when I talked to her about this proposal for local ordinance, she basically told me, well, I'm never driving through Morris Township again because I love it, right? Here we are 5 weeks later. She's been in the hospital now for 5 weeks. And I only tell you that because we've had conversations back and forth so much about how she's so addicted to the Juuls, and that's all she keeps thinking about when she wants to get out is like next time she can hit her Juul, which is just, to me, it's like devastating, right? Because all you ever want to do as a parent is make sure that your kids are safe and healthy and grow up and lead great lives, right? So I just wanted to share that with you because I think that there was a little bit of, what's the word I'm looking for? Like people were confused about what the purpose was for us wanting to introduce this local ordinance, right? Whenever people hear about police officers wanting to get involved in juveniles, business, it's the first thing people think of is, well, I'm the parent. and I get that. But what you should know is I was also the school resource officer. Nate could attest to it, right, Nate? He was one of my first kids over at Freeling Heights in middle school, so I have a really I have a real connection to the school, and I was the DB sergeant for the last year, and so I got to see everything that coming in. So for anybody who's sitting in the audience right now who is anti this local ordinance because they're worried about what's going to happen with their kids in the juvenile justice system, I just want you to take the next 10 minutes and kind of take that out of your mind and be very open to what we're saying, because the cause of this is not to try and penalize your kid. We're not going to come into a classroom like stormtroopers and lock your kid up because they have a Juul. What we want to do is we want to create a partnership with parents and with the community, and we want to be on your side, and we want to help you, and we want to give you options in order to allow your kids and you to be more educated about what can be better, which is why we've introduced a local ordinance, or we want to introduce a local ordinance, that will help you guys in that. But I want to stress the fact that it's more like a partnership than it is us against you guys. So with the local ordinance, it's a lot of legal jargon, but basically what it says is that anyone under the age of 21 in the Township of Morris that is found to be in possession of one of the electronic nicotine delivery systems, thank you, could face local ordinance charges. So anybody who's over 18, the chief's going to go into that. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what's already being done. Obviously, right now, the only state statute we have in regards to this stuff is regulating who's selling it and how they're selling it and who they're selling it to. I can only attest for what we do as a police department in Morris Township, and what I can tell you is that we were extremely proactive over a year ago when we saw this becoming a bigger problem in the middle school, that we started going into every single place in Morris Township that has the ability to sell these, and we asked for them to partner with us in order to not sell them to kids that are under 21. We made sure that they were in regulation with the correct signs. We let them know what the law was and what the penalty was, and we've done follow-ups with that, and they are still in partnership with us. What I can also tell you is that when we get a report of a kid who has allegedly purchased it from there or gotten it from there, we ask questions like, okay, what time were you in there, when were you in there, and we go in there, and all of our businesses have video cameras, and we work with them and we check. Because what we're finding is that when kids get caught with these things, they're not telling us the truth of where they got them, because they want to keep going back to the places that will sell them illegally, right? So if it's somewhere that's actually happening in Morristown or Morris Plains or somewhere in the general vicinity, they'll tell us it happened in our town, and we can confirm that that's not what's going on, right? Kids want to be able to get these. They don't want to get the people in trouble that are doing it, and that's what it is. So I wanted everybody to know that. There are federal agencies that are supposed to regulate it and everything. However, with federal funding, sometimes they don't always have it going. I know Mrs. White had talked to me about that last week. So even though we have things that say that they are regulated by the federal government and they do spot checks and stuff, depending on what's going on, sometimes that isn't funded. And I just told you what we did as an agency as far as that's concerned. And then I'm not as well versed in Title 26, I'll be very honest. That's the Clean Air Act. Right, Clean Air Act, did I say that right? But as far as the local ordinance is concerned, right, our main concern is really educating the kids. And what I can tell you is that already we have Patrolman McIver, who is our full-time school resource officer up at Freeling Heights Middle School. And if something does happen where there's a kid that's found with a vape or a Juul, or they're in the bathroom or whatever, we are already notified. And what we do is Patrolman McIver will go into in-school suspension with them, whatever penalty they're getting from the school, whatever it is, and she'll sit down and she'll have a conversation with them. And she'll explain to them the dangers, and she shows them a PowerPoint, and she educates them. And that's really what we're looking to do as the first stop of this local ordinance with juveniles. We want to educate them and the parents. So, do you want me to get into this? Okay. So, that's the first thing, and that's going to happen no matter what. And here's the really great news that I can tell you, is in the past 2 years that we've implemented this, we have never had a repeat offender. Never. Not once. Right? So there's people that are concerned that, oh, this happens multiple times, my kid's going to have to go for a station house adjustment, they're going to have to do community service, they're going to have to do this. But I went back and I searched the last week just to confirm, and we have never had a repeat offender with just the tobacco aspect. I can't say the same for the marijuana and the THC oil, but I can say for the tobacco. If a kid is caught with THC oil, it's automatically a drug charge. It doesn't count as this local ordinance, so that's not even what we're talking about. So I just want to put people's minds at ease. With the local ordinance, if we get it or when it goes through, the first offense would be the handled release. That'll happen if they're at Ginty Pool and all of a sudden they're caught, and whatever happens, they're on their bicycle, they're smoking. I pull up as a police officer and I'm like, hey, you look like you're 12. What are you doing with this? It's called handled release. We call your parent, Parent comes, we give you both educational information, we walk away, and that's it. The second time is what's called a station house adjustment. A station house adjustment is in lieu of charges. It's our opportunity to educate you even more, have a little bit of a further consequence. It isn't just a handled release. You have to come in, we inconvenience the parent and the kid a little bit by coming in and having a conversation with our juvenile detective, and then that's it. There's no police record. They're not going to go to university and they're going to be like, were you ever arrested? And your kid has to say yes. It's not going to be like that. And then the rest of the proposed is for a third offense, there would be mandatory community service, which would be up to 25 hours. Fourth offense would be up to 50 hours. But as I've said, we haven't seen anything go past the first offense. The education aspect of this and having a little bit more of a consequence than just at the school seems to be really working.
Just to piggyback on what the lieutenant said, right now, just to talk about a little bit of our cooperation, our relationship with the school district, because anything could change at any given moment on how the school decides to handle it. But in the state of New Jersey, there's a memorandum of agreement between education institutions and law enforcement. So possession of tobacco, use of tobacco products is not a mandatory notification to the police department, as if it's of something violent, possession of a handgun, possession of drugs, bias incidents such as that. Right now, they do voluntarily give us that information. That's our school resource officer, Patrolman MacGyver, that the lieutenant was talking about, because we're working together. So if student A is found in possession of these items, the information is given to the school resource officer, who then conducts an educational session with the student. There's nothing beyond that. If the ordinance was passed, we don't intend on coming into the school and telling the school on how to handle it. We still want the educators to do what they would do in those circumstances. We have no intentions of going in and taking over from the school. This is, we're there to assist them, but this would help us when these children are found out in the public or on private property, these parties having them. What we really didn't go into is those little devices, those little pods, right? They're called, they can get them full of marijuana, THC oil. Those of you that have ever noticed the odor of marijuana, it's very distinct, right? There's no odor with the pods. It's very easy to conceal. My daughter told me herself that the kids are vaping and using marijuana right in the class. Right in the class. They have to remove the doors from the bathroom location. I mean, it's crazy. It's like it's jail, because there's so much vaping going on at the school administrators, the school teachers, they just can't keep up with this. And that's why it's so important for us to have it. And I guarantee you're going to think I'm trying to trick you with the next thing I'm saying, but I'm really not. So a little bit of a law lesson. There's state statutes, right, which is done by legislation, and there's local ordinances, which is legislation basically through our municipal government. State statute will always trump municipal ordinance, but there's nothing that I've ever seen in the law that says we have to charge somebody with a state statute rather than a local ordinance, right? So there's no local ordinance for murder. You commit a murder, say in New Jersey, it's a state statute. But there is some statutes like disorderly conduct, possession of alcohol, where we have an ordinance that somewhat mirrors the state statute, but the punitive penalties for it are not as severe. A state law was introduced by Assemblyman Bucco for the illegal possession of underage vape. Essentially what we're trying to do with ordinance, they're trying to make a state statute. If that's the case and we don't have something else, there will be more severe penalties for children and adults. Because if there's only a state statute, which they're going to identify this as a disorderly persons offense, which a local ordinance is less than a disorderly persons offense, we will have nothing else but to charge our juveniles and our adults under the age of 21 with state statute, which means that juveniles will go to municipal court under a state statute. Under a local ordinance, we will have the option to issue or deal with it in a local ordinance setting where they're going to stay out of municipal court. The Title 26, the Clean Air Act, we've looked at, and it does identify the school as a public place. It does identify the device. But the health department, we've determined, are the ones that truly issue those summonses. Those summonses start at $250, $500, and then $1,000. So that's our other alternative that we potentially have if we don't have an ordinance to deal with this. And then the other state statute the lieutenant talked about really only regulates the sale of these products. And again, I think you went into it, we've been very proactive. We've been there to each location twice in 2018. And we're gearing up to do it again in 2019. When we meet with store owners, we make sure they have that the publication poster. We give them a copy of the statute, we make sure they understand it, and we essentially ask for their cooperation with it. If we go back to the handout, just dealing with the juveniles again, Jessica is here, and you're more than willing to say something or not, but she works again for Department of Human Services, and she also was very big in assisting us with means outside of the police department. So in Ellie's presentation, she talked about a lot of these kids haven't even developed their abilities to deal with cope with stress and anxiety, and that sometimes they're using these substances to self-medicate for something else that's going on in their life, some other type of stressor. So for the Center for Evaluation and Counseling, right, correctly, we can essentially refer our juveniles out to that agency that will be able to assist us with other with the community service element and also educational service groups dealing with offense-specific types, such as, can you just throw a couple letter out there, if you don't mind?
Yeah, well, so we're actually working to try to start a vaping and vaping/smoking educational class.
Could you use the microphone, please,
I'm sorry. So we're trying to create a vaping / smoking alcohol educational class for such occasions. You can't just, this is a issue that's just started coming up recently in many other towns besides your own town also. So we're working to put that together. In the meantime, we are utilizing the Center for Evaluation and Counseling and their program that they already have, which they do a lot of psychoeducational groups, and they focus on things like anger management, life skills, job skills, positive decision making, healthy choices, conflict resolution. So, I think any teenager can benefit from these classes and these topics. So right now, that's what the police would be utilizing. But hopefully, in the near future, we can actually start a program, an educational class specifically for vaping, because I can guarantee you that most of the people who are smoking this stuff don't know most of what Ellie told us tonight. So, so that's what we're doing, and hopefully we can get that into place soon.
And you also help us with the supervision of the community service element, if there is one.
Right. So through the Center for Evaluation and Counseling, they monitor the community service. So, that's just an easy little piece of it. So the police can refer there for that.
So as you can see on that page, there's nothing in there that suggests that there's going to be a record, that your children are going to be criminalized, that there's going to be a monetary fine, any type of detention of any kind. It's all educational based, and even the community service, we're looking for it to be something to better the community. Something the child learns from, that there is a consequence when you violate an ordinance. However, it's not going to be a monetary fine, you're not going to go on juvenile detention of any means. You're going to give back to the community and the public in a positive means. As far as adults, it's very simple. If you're 18, 19, or 20, you will be issued the local ordinance, which is essentially like a motor vehicle summons. There will be an appearance in court. Obviously, if this is introduced or if this is adopted, it would be completely new. So, I would say it's probably about 20 years ago when we created the local ordinance for underage possession of alcohol. And, I was very early in my career, but I can imagine there was probably people that had concerns then. And I can tell you it has done its job, and juvenile parties are down, and juvenile issues with underage drinking, they still exist, but they're significantly down from the past. And whether this is adopted or not, we're still going to continue doing what we're doing with education. We've expanded our education on drugs and alcohol outside of just the 6th grade, because the leads, it used to be DARE, now it's leads, it used to just be 6th grade. And we said, well, wait a minute, their peer pressure only increases as they go into 7th and 8th grade. They only want to do worse stuff as they go into 7th and 8th grade, and we've been giving this education. So that will be continuing no matter what. And we're also going backwards into the 5th grade when we can. to give the education as well. So, you know, by the time you're 18, you're now an adult, you've gotten the education, you know right from wrong, and you're gonna get a local ordinance summons. I talked to Judge, or Gary Troxel, and he's a judge in the municipal court. And some of you may have seen that there's only one set of penalties for local ordinance, so whether it's urinating in public, or a dog at large, or unlicensed dog, or underage possession of alcohol, or underage possession of a vaping substance, it all has the same penalty, which says it could be up to $2,000 fine, could be up to 90 days in jail. I know it's probably not enough for me to say that's never going to happen. It has never happened. And talking to Judge Troxel, the way they usually handle underage alcohol is usually about a $250 fine, can be loss of license, and it can be community service. Speaking with Judge Troxel, he was willing to commit that a first offense for an adult would be $50, second offense for an adult would be $100, and the third offense for an adult would be $150. So again, unfortunately, I don't have anything in paper to give that to you. That would be, you know, the word of the judge, and how, you know, the decision of the judge as well. It's up to him as far as how he administers the fines and penalties of court. It's not up to the police department. It's not up to the governing body either. And that's. You have anything else before we open it up to questions? That's our presentation. We're more than welcoming to you to ask us your questions, and we'll do our best we can to answer them.
So before we start the public Q&A, I'm going to ask anybody who wants to make a comment to come up to the podium and name and address. Is that appropriate? Okay. So we usually ask people to state their name and address, so we just have a public record of it. To limit your comments to 5 minutes, and if you want to speak more after everybody else has spoken, you'll have another 5 minutes. Just before you go, I just wanted to make a couple comments myself. Just to remind everybody that the committee has agreed to postpone any further action on this till May 15th, so we are not taking any action on this month nor next month. As the chief referenced, Assemblyman Bucco and Assemblywoman DeCroce have proposed this state legislation. It hasn't been assigned to committee yet, so I think it's going to be a while before we get really any state action on it. But we're going to wait to see how it progresses down in Trenton and get some feedback on that too. And lastly, as the chief stated himself and Lieutenant Goglich stated, I too am a parent of 2 teenagers, and I would not want to subject any other kids to something that I wouldn't subject my own kids to as well. So just wanted to state that for the record also. Please go ahead.
Hi, I'm Patricia Giannaco. I'm at 50 Independence Way. Thank you for this presentation. It's really informative, but I got to say you guys have your work cut out for you, and I really applaud your efforts to do the work. When vaping first started, I remember seeing some ad on television with some celebrity saying, I forget even who it was, saying, you know, it's let's all be grown up here, it's only vapor type of thing. Hadn't seen that for a very long time. In the meantime, Juul was introduced. There were a lot of reports about, you know, the problems of addiction, especially with Juul because of the flavoring and all that stuff. The other day I was watching television and I was astonished to see an ad come on. Now there's no cigarette advertising, but it said something along the lines of, started with, you know, this talks about nicotine delivery devices. Nicotine is a dangerous substance. Then it went on to talk about how technology has improved the delivery systems for it, makes for a much better vape, that sort of thing. So I don't know if we're getting a pushback now because of the criticisms or because of the kind of work that you folks are doing. So I suppose, I don't know what you can do about advertising, getting public service announcements up. That's been done for years with cigarettes. No cigarette advertising, but public service announcements about the problems with it. I think that's probably one of the efforts that's going to have to be made with these. And again, thank you very much. I think you're doing great work, and good luck with it. It's tough. It's tough, and you need to be as relentless as the people who sell this stuff. Thank you
for your comments.
Thank you.
I don't know if the two of you could comment on that, but I would imagine there's probably something the government says, you can have your commercial, but you at least got to put a little blurb about how dangerous it is. I don't know.
So what they do have is like the Truth Initiative commercials, and like if you listen on the radio, there's like, call this number if you are addicted to the Juul. It's just slow. It's a slow process.
And the National Association of Public Health Officers are going after, trying to make it illegal to advertise on television like they did with the cigarettes.
Hi, I'm Nicole Pitaluga from 22 Molly Stark Drive. And full disclosure, I am a clinician at the Center for Evaluation and Counseling. And I worked in Sussex County in the juvenile program years ago when it first started. And when I first heard about the ordinance through the media, I was very concerned because I did not have all the information. And I feel a lot better about it knowing what I've heard tonight. I would ask, is it possible, I've seen this in Illinois, where instead of the fine, they offered an educational diversion program for 18 to 20-year-olds. I would like to see that maybe as part of the proposal, that, you know, when they do go before the judge, they have the opportunity to do the educational program. And I just would like to know how the ordinance fits in with what the school has been implementing in recent months with the educational program as well. So I don't know if anybody knows about that.
I can speak about what they have been doing at the school. The guidance counselors they tell me that they're going every single, and only at the middle school, I can say. The guidance counselors, along with the help, teachers do presentations inside the classroom as well on an educational basis. And part of the LEAD program that Patrolman McIver does in 6th grade for every single 6th grade student, and we also do have it in Spanish for Spanish-only speaking students. They are educated as far as we can do. I mean, it's minimal. For us, our presentation's about 35 minutes that we do with the kids, but we do round back through.
Okay. And the state statute about the sellers, I guess, can there be a part of the ordinance that puts additional penalties on sellers that's a local fine in addition to the state fine? My other question about that is, are we doing anything, or can we do something to partner with Morristown and Morris Plains because of the geography of Morris Township to their establishments that sell these products? And what can we do with the state legislature in terms of making state laws tougher on sellers? Because I think that, I mean, we have the example from tobacco and how big tobacco was kind of finally put down with the advertising and the cartoons, and so this flavoring is kind of along those lines. Like, we need more laws about the flavorings and how they're marketing really their products to get people addicted at this young age. And it worked with tobacco. It took a really long time, but it worked with tobacco, and I think it could work if we go after these people that are producing these products.
Ms. Whitehead?
So part of the problem with enforcement of people who sell to underage is that the health official has to see it, or the student who buys it has to testify, which, you know, they really don't want to do. So that's a problem. The health officers are still going after the situation with pretty vigorous, but it's very hard to do a lot of enforcement when you don't have any. When the school principal is calling the health officer to say, I'm pretty sure the kids are getting their vaping products from XYZ. So I work very closely with all the nurses in the Morris School District, and during meetings they report me things, and my health officer in another town is the same health officer for Morristown. So I have like a hot button with her, and I'm sending her all over the place. What I can tell you is Morristown's working on something. I'm hoping that eventually we're going to work on something. It'll make it harder for us to sell. That's my dream. In my dreamland, that's always how I present things to Tim. Imagine if we could do this. What I can tell you happened in Hanover, which worked very, very well. They made a licensing fee of $750. So if you want to sell vaping products, you have to spend it. So we went from 20 places that sell vaping to 4. So that was pretty good. So if we can do something like that eventually with the other towns, all encompassing, because it's all our children.
Right. And the other thought I had was, back in my youth, they had these stings that they did with kids and the health department, where they would set the kids up to go in and buy, like, kind of.
So there's no taste money right now. But I know in one of the towns that we mentioned, well, let's go like that, okay? When they collect the money, they're going to use that for the taste enforcement. So that would be, if that would all work out, that would be really great. So just keep hoping that everybody's moving forward the way we want.
And Nicole, this month the FDA put out draft guidance to start trying to limit the flavors. For e-cigarettes, that's not all flavors. They leave out some, but they're going after like bubble gum and yeah, exactly. So just letting you know about that too. That may take years to implement, but the federal government's trying to step in, at least as of now. So there may be more to come down the road with that.
And if I could add to that, since there is legislation introduced down in Trenton, this body has the opportunity to comment on that legislation, and one of the things we might comment on, and we can discuss it later, is whether we suggest that they add flavors to their proposed legislation, and let's ban it in New Jersey. We can do that in New Jersey even if the FDA doesn't do that, or the federal government doesn't do that. So it's an opportunity here in New Jersey. I also wanted to say, you brought up the school district and sellers. I mean, it's a multifaceted problem. We realize it's a multifaceted problem. This ordinance is not, the end all for anything. We understand that. It's only one element in a much bigger picture, a much bigger equation. And we need to do more than just this to tackle the problem if we decide to proceed with this.
I had one thing to add to your question about what is the school district doing. The superintendent put out a statement that it's worth looking up and reading. I believe it's on their website. And they are doing quite a bit, and it had to do with their curriculum. They have a health and wellness emphasis on social, emotional. And they also have a lot going on through their counseling department. And there was also information about their approach to discipline. So I would recommend looking that up. It's very thorough.
Thank you.
And one last comment about the sellers. Marijuana is illegal, but people still get their hands on marijuana. We're talking about a device here that's actually legal for sale, 21 and above. I think it's pretty easy to get if you wanted to get it. Cracking down on sellers is one thing, but I think there are just bad people out there who are going to buy them and sell them to little kids.
Right, and there's also the whole online sales. So.
Right.
Wow, I have to just say, I have a daughter in high school, and I have one in college. My college-age daughter called me and said, "You've got to get on this with my sister because this is an epidemic in college. And I know she's doing it. She must be doing it because all the kids are doing it." I thought, oh, God. Oh, yes, sorry, Rachel Linden. I'm at 35 Buckley Hill Road in the township. So I know it's a major problem, and asking my daughter, who's an athlete, "Are you doing this?" "No, Mom, but I know a lot of people who are," and I can only take it at face value. And I thought to myself when I came home, wow, that's really helpful that she got the mail today on her way in. And I thought, I had to sit back and think for a second. Well, was there a reason why she got it other than just being helpful? Like, because we get Amazon, stuff gets delivered, UPS. So, anyhow, definitely concerned, and I don't know how you're going to be able to police that. It's definitely something we'll have to keep on our radar as parents. And I don't know, are there ordinances about mailing to a minor? Wow, there should be. I think that's going to be the big one moving forward. Okay, my next question is, so we have smoke detectors. I'm assuming that those don't pick up vaping fumes? Okay. is there a vape detector for a classroom? I mean, we laugh, but how do we know if 5 kids are doing it? My kid's sitting in that classroom, and I know how sensitive lung tissue is. I studied medicine for several years, and you can't get that back. That's really difficult to heal. And when you need it at a job where you're dealing with a fire or you're dealing with a situation, you walk into something you don't know what you're getting exposed to, boy, what a hazard it would be if you limited your capacity as a child out of not knowing any better or whatever. So,
If I could,
Yeah.
Morristown High School actually purchased one.
Oh,
And
they
they're-
did?
They're testing it out to see what it is. So there are I don't want to call them dummies. Tested. There are testers for it, but they got one, and they've been moving it out throughout different locations of the backroom. But it was only within the last week, so as soon as I find out information, I'll have it.
Brilliant. Do you know what it costs? Just out of curiosity.
idea.
Okay.
I don't.
We got excess budget somewhere. That's something we'll probably have to look at. I want to say too, the educators really have their work cut out for them too, because tobacco had major class action lawsuits, and the money to educate about how harmful tobacco was came on the back of class actions that took decades to put together. And they worked against industry that had doctors saying, we prefer Camels. The movie, if you're interested about it, that talks about the story and the perversion of what truth and health was for decades is called Merchants of Doubt. It's a good one and it's free on YouTube. So I don't know when the class action lawsuits will be coming through, probably 10, 20, 30 years from now, and we'll all be testifying. So my next question is, how can we secure, I work on a lot of policies, sometimes at the federal level, and there's always downstream effects that we can't anticipate. And my concern that I'm sure is not something that the good folks in our police department would subvert this sort of ordinance to pick up kids in a minority class just to see if their parents have driver's licenses to pursue some alternative agenda about deportation or something stupid. But I moved here from a border town, and you'd be surprised, there are a few people out there that would take something like this and use it against, use it for alternative agenda. And I just want to make sure that we're not pulling over kids of a certain ethnic grouping just so that we can call their parents in, knowing full well they're not going to be prepared to give a driver's license and a whatever, and that this doesn't become a tool for some kind of harassment as opposed to what it's really meant for.
That's a fair question, and the way I'm going to answer it is kind of going to be a little weird, but we really wouldn't need this ordinance if that's what our intentions were to do. We could use whatever it else means, whatever the other statute and ordinance. Speaking on behalf of the Morris Township Police, of course, I'm going to tell you that's an extremely professional department that does not engage in biased policing whatsoever. There's actually a state law that prohibits officers from asking the immigration status of anybody, whether they're a victim or a suspect. So again, I can only assure you that Morris Township Police would not engage in tactics like that. We never have, and we never will. There's state law that prohibits racial profiling, there's state law that prohibits, there's the immigration trust that's just enacted by New Jersey Attorney General's office, and it's just the bottom line, it's not going to happen.
Thank you for answering that. I appreciate it. And thank you for changing. I know that originally there were some tougher restrictions and some tougher guidelines and some heftier fees, and I know that the folks in this room have taken into consideration a lot of communication about that. And so I'm just glad that we're working together to help the community and the kids. Thank you.
Thank you. Rachel, just on that last point, just for clarification, as the chief stated earlier, the penalties are still falling under the same statute as other things like littering and loose animals and whatever else falls under this general statute. But in terms of the penalties, we've gotten feedback from the judge that it is going to be much lower fees than what is the maximum fee of $2,000 within that statute. So maybe that's the explanation you were referring to. But the statute is still going to be the statute with those maximum $2,000 fines. But the judge has said that he's going to implement the policy of 50, 100, 150 for fines.
That's good to know. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just checked, and there is a device called FlySense, costs $995 per year. It's a cloud-based monitoring and alert service, which not only monitors the vaping, but sounds in school to protect against bullying.
Thank you so much.
Hi, Melanie Smith, 9 Victoria Lane. I just want to say, first of all, just the presentations were really well done. It was very informative, and I'm glad I learned a lot of information about the subject and what the ordinance is, which was very helpful, so I just wanted to say thank you. I have a question. So I came in with a question, and I still have the question. You talked a lot about Frelinghuysen, and as a parent of a 5th grader in the school district, should be going to Frelinghuysen next year, I'm concerned about unfairly targeting Frelinghuysen students. We have the service officers there. We have them in 7 of the 10 schools in the district, I believe. And how are you going to give parents of school districts, especially Frelinghuysen students, the comfort to know that our students will not be more targeted than kids who are going to other schools that are also in the township? So Assumption or Peck or Martin, which are also located. We have officers at Frelinghuysen, so you have eyes in that building, and it feels to me a lot like those kids will be unfairly targeted. How are you going to ensure us that won't happen?
That's great, that's another fair question. So the school resource officer, again, obviously a Morris Township police officer assigned to the school, that's not their function. Their function is to integrate with the school system, with the school educators, and to provide education, to be a liaison between the school and the police department. There is an enforcement component. Usually it's reactive when there's stolen cell phones, bullying that turns into assaults, bias incidents because, swastika was drawn on the, the bathroom stall, stuff like that. The Class 3 officer, the intention, nothing about a Class 3 officer is enforcement related. They are there primarily and specifically for the safety of the students, the parents that are coming onto the premises, and the educators themselves. So Class 3 officers are not there for enforcement. We've had nothing but great feedback from not only the school, from parents. We have not only a very diverse police department, we have a very diverse group of SLEO 3 that are Spanish speaking, that represent the African American community, represent the Asian community, represent the Hispanic community. So again, kind of going back to what the other woman had asked us, you have my word as the executive of the department that we don't engage in those tactics. Have we never, and nor will we. And the system is designed so that those things do not happen.
So if that service officer, so a follow-up question would be, if that service officer is there and sees a Frelinghuysen student with an N, what happens?
It's referred to the school. Like I said, we have a tremendous relationship with the Morris School District. And again, we're talking a lot about like Morristown. This is an epidemic everywhere, whatever state you go to. It's not just Morristown. I hope I can give that impression it's just Frelinghuysen kids, or it's just Morris Township kids, or Morristown, Morris Plains kids when they get to high school. It's the same as, there's thresholds. There's things that the school handles, and there's things that the police department handles. So if there's a bullying, it gets referred to the school. If the officer sees that, it gets referred to the school. If the officer, God forbid, sees a sexual contact of some sort, it gets referred to the police department. So there's things that are always going to be kept in the school. We don't plan on coming and taking over for the school. Even if this ordinance is adopted, because right now, even though it's not an ordinance, it's still a violation of school rules. So it essentially could be taking place, any type of racial profiling or bias-based policing without this ordinance. Like I said, there's laws, we have rules and regs, but the biggest thing you're going to walk away from is the word of the police chief that we don't engage in these tactics. We don't.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Are you more concerned about no matter what the student is, that at Frelinghuysen, that's the only place we're putting our resources in the form of combating?
Yeah.
Okay, I understand where you're coming from with that. And when we say Frelinghuysen, in all honesty, and Ellie kind of indicated it, we're seeing the rise of the possession of them starting in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. So obviously, we want to educate lower. But you talk about Peck and Assumption, and they're not in Morris Township. So as Morris Township police officers, we don't necessarily have the same span in order to do the education aspect. In a school like Frelinghuysen, Officer McIver is not going to like be going everywhere and be like, I want to check your backpack. There's state statutes that we can't do that. We can't have the school act as we have to do illegal searches and seizures on students. Our role is really to help educate, and it's what we're going to continue to do. And when they're in a school setting, it's up to the school to do what they're going to do. And they have tactics in place already. And they do at the high school also. I just don't want to speak out of turn in regards to what they do in the high school because I'm not as educated. That's Officer Dietrich, who's with Morristown High School. But I understand your concern as a parent that you think that we're just going to be walking into school and looking for kids doing this. We just want to help. This is our way of being reactive to the problem, but proactive at the same time. Because for 2 years we're dealing with kids, girls pulling them out of their sports bras and taking a hit in class, or going into and we're walking in and we're having a vape and kids are coughing who have other health issues that they're concerned about. We already have the teachers in the school doing like periodic half-hour checks last year because of the amount of vaping that's happening in the bathrooms. So, I mean, I can understand your point from a parent with worrying about the kids specifically in Frelinghuysen being targeted. That age group is where, as a police department in Morris Township, we have the reach. And then obviously moving down to like Normandy and Sussex, those in the 5th graders, we're going to start to worry about them too. But we're just trying to combat it head on. And with any initiative that we've done, and let me just take you back to when cyber harassment became a 4th-degree law, or a 4th-degree crime, I was a school resource officer there, and what we did when we implemented it is we had a huge informational session with the students. So it wasn't just like, oh, bam, this is going to happen to you. We educated them on what would happen if they had it. So they had the heads up about that as well. Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
And just to add to that, I presume and I would hope that the police department is going to do educational sessions at Morristown, Beard, and Delbarton, and Villa Walsh, the schools that are in Morris Township, because there's concern at those schools there. It's not just the public schools. There's big concern at the private schools as well about what's going on there. So it's a town-wide effort. It's not targeting just one school.
Good evening. My name is Catherine Mazzini. I live at 22 Laura Lane, and I've been a resident for 16 years. I have 2 young children, one in elementary school, one who just started at Frelinghuysen. I have to say it's my first public comment meeting. I wouldn't come out for many other reasons than my children. So I do thank you, everyone, for your efforts, and it was a very thoughtful presentation. I do feel like I do have a better understanding of the intent and some of the components. With that said, I still feel at this point in time, I don't necessarily fully support the ordinance at this point in time. I still have some big concerns. First, kind of come from the view and believe that the approach should be heavily on prevention, intervention, support. From what I've seen, parents who were hearing about this and trying to prepare ourselves, and maybe we're on the overly involved side. But there hasn't been a lot out there offered by the township, by the county, by anyone in terms of education. Actually, just a couple weeks ago, I went to my first presentation to learn about vaping, and actually the same presentation here from Ellie and Ms. Pritt, and I have to say it was 2 hours well spent. I felt like I came away a little more empowered in terms of being able to parent it and know what it is, what to look for, and how to have better discussions with my child. I would urge any parent to take the time out of their schedule for an hour or two to learn more about it. But there aren't a lot of things offered. I feel like our Girl Scout troop was trying to find someone to hire to come in and do presentations. Other parents have traveled as far as South Jersey, finding out a YMCA has been holding an education session. So, I mean, step one in all of this is kind of educating us parents. I don't consider myself, but 20 plus years ago, we weren't dealing with this. So it just seems a little soon to be introducing an ordinance that I'm still feeling is a little of the punitive nature, when we still haven't had the time or the resources or the budget allocations provided by our township to educate us. Second to that is the addiction services, and that was very helpful to hear there's things in the pipeline. But I've spoken to many parents, unfortunately, with kids older than mine, that when you look at the statistics, 1 in 3 trying vaping, they're addicted in less than a week. We're talking about a huge population of kids, and there are no addiction services in place currently.
the school district has taken it upon themselves to kind of come up with things, I guess, in parallel with what everyone else is doing. But again, there's no place to go right now. So, you know, to be looking at this ordinance before we have step 1, education, step 2, a place for parents to go. Pediatricians don't have an answer. Atlantic Health doesn't have an answer. Our county and government doesn't have an answer. So it's been up to the parents to try to figure out how to offer coping skills and, you know, and help their kids. So, you know, those were my biggest concerns. I think other people touched on it. You know, we definitely want to see a bigger crackdown on the sellers, and I have a better understanding of, you know, some of the challenges in place with that, but those consequences should be far harsher than what were presented to our children who are the victims in all of this. Lastly, you know, I had the same concern as Melanie, who just spoke. Given I have a child at Ravenheim and I'm involved with the district, I see all the great things they're trying to do and the partnership they have in place. I have to say my daughter's been there less than a year. She's had the health curriculum. I think she got a really good handle on the health risks. She knows the officers' names at the school, and what they've been taught is there are people to go to if you have a problem. You know, the thing is that they've been told it's not your fault if this happens to you and you need to go to an adult to get help. I do have a worry that from their point of view, that they're going to be getting in trouble, that is actually going to hurt the relationships in place if that's happening within the school atmosphere. I understand, you know, outside of that. I did also have the concern, you know, like Jeff mentioned, this is happening everywhere. I do hope all the private schools hope to bring, you know, the township and the resources in, but I can't see them actually picking up the phone and calling and actually having their children go through the same process that our children will be going in Great Lake Island. So I still have a lot of concerns that prevent me from saying I'm in full support of the ordinance, although I appreciate all the thought that goes into it. And I just hope as a community, I think we're all caring individuals, a lot of resources. I'm just hoping if it doesn't pass as is, be able to go back to the table and maybe just make sure all the right stakeholders are in place, so making sure it's a very well coordinated and well thought out. Thank you.
Catherine, I think you spoke very, very well and very eloquently, and thank you. And I think one of the things that you brought out that has been spoken about before is I think the 3 towns, Morristown, Morris Plains, and Morris Township, should be working to prevent these sellers from selling this product. So thank you so much for your comments.
And before you step down too, I also think you made some excellent points, particularly the point about if a kid is addicted, what are we going to do about that? That's an excellent point. I have received tons of email, I should say tons, but probably about 40 emails since this was introduced. And it's a full range of people who are contacting me, from people who are very concerned about their kids getting involved, all the way through parents who understand that their kids are addicted and concerned about what's going to happen to them under this ordinance for a kid who's already addicted and can't stop. And I totally get that. We get that. We're not trying to make the situation worse. But I hadn't thought about the point that you just made until now, that for the kids that are addicted, we do need proper services in place to help them. So thank you very much for that comment.
Hi, I'm Melissa Spiota, 9 Wood Road. Where to begin? So thank you so much for the presenters. This is not new information to me. I've educated myself over the past couple of years about this stuff, and I am vehemently against vaping, like anyone would be. I don't know why anyone would be in favor of vaping. I appreciate the multiple people in the room that were presenting that mentioned that they are parents and how important that is to them. I don't think anyone, unless I'm wrong, is a parent of a child in the public school in this community, which to me, that matters, because unless you're going to your community and lobbying for this, I don't think it's the same thing. It's great to see some of the clarity, but then when Rachel was up here before clarifying the fines, there are some fines. Are 50, 100, and 150 horrible? For me, no, they're not. For some people, that could be a ton of money. So I think that that's important. I'm not so sure, Sergeant, when Melanie asked the question, and she happened to mention 2 schools in town, and then Jeff, you threw out at the end the township schools, because there are multiple township schools. I don't have so much confidence that, even though, to your point, Chief, that even though the officers that are there are for specific things and they're not necessarily there for this ordinance, it's my understanding that this might have been crafted through you out of what happens at Frelinghuysen and things that you want to change because of what you heard. So it's not a matter of those officers are going to know what's happening, and if the school doesn't report it, there's going to be an issue with that. Whereas at Villa and Dolbarton and Marsan Beard, that isn't the case. There's not going to be anyone to say, "Oh wow, you didn't do that. Sorry," which gives me a lot of discomfort, thinking that even though we're all really well intended, I don't know that the people that run the other schools are as well intended to just protect themselves. And to me, it feels like a matter sort of like what Melanie's saying, that I went to Morristown High. When my family moved to Morris Plains in like 1982, 81, the riots were 5 years before that, and the rumors about how terrible the schools were, I went to the school thinking, oh man, am I gonna have to be scared? And it wasn't anything like that. But this community has been battling against that information, and I think to myself, so here's gonna be like another, our fabulous colleague from the press is here. It's going to be another ticker of public school, check, 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 check. Another thing that we're doing wrong. And guess what? For everyone who isn't here for worrying about vaping, it affects our community, because when the schools are great in a community, guess what? Your property taxes go up. So it affects everyone, the public perception of our community. So I think that's a problem. The video that you showed, at the very end, the kids are like, if they ban the flavors, that would make a big difference. If they ban the flavors, if they ban the flavors, if they ban the flavors, if they ban the flavors. That was like the whole output of that whole video. And I'm like, I'm watching this video to sell this ordinance, but nothing is selling this ordinance. There's really only one thing, and I'm going to put a pin in that. There's one thing that is potentially selling that ordinance. It's my understanding that vaping sales in this country have increased 40% in the past year. I don't mean this to offend you, but biannual checks to our sellers seems like we're really taking an aggressive stance with our sellers. Like, I can't reconcile those two things. That doesn't seem like that's really aggressive. I'm thinking monthly might be enough. Because Jeff, to your point, yeah, it might not be those sellers, there could be other sellers, but the bottom line is these 11 to 14-year-olds that are really mostly who this was targeted to are just victims. And to the communication that you and I, Jeff, have had many times about this is deterrence. For the kids that didn't start, this is deterrence. For the kids who already started, this is just in your system, in the system, okay, maybe it's not a criminal record, but it's curious to me that we're saying that we checked and there's never been a repeat, so I don't know why we need this. If there's never been a repeat, what is it for then? And if it's a part, like, I'm not sure, I appreciate the words, this is a partnership. I don't see the truth of this really being a partnership. I do believe what the schools are attempting to do is more of a partnership. And I do think, I've heard a lot of good things about the relationships that the various officers in the schools have. There is a partnership that goes along with that. I'm not sure I see the partnership aspect in what's written in this ordinance, although I do appreciate that there's more clarity. I do have a lot of concern about, and I have a freshman at the high school, so she's only 14 years old, and actually she won't be 18 until she just about goes to college. But I know that this was targeted towards this presentation, I believe, was targeted towards the parents of younger kids. But there are people in this room who have kids who are already addicted, and they're very close to 18 years old. And right here, and actually someone else up there mentioned the teenage brain and 25, which really I think that's the average. It's 22 for girls, 27 for boys. But then Chief mentioned when they're adults at 18, well, those two things don't reconcile. You know, if they're already addicted at 16, and then at 8, whatever, it really wasn't spelled out here, but 18 to 20, it's much harsher consequences. But by then, if you're catching them when they're 18, they probably have been doing it for 5 years. And if you think this ordinance and community service or whatever is going to help them, it's not. I'm sorry, it's just not. That's just the truth. So, okay, I'm going to take the pin out of the one reason why this ordinance could make sense, which I'm going to negate everything I just said. If what you said is true, if that ordinance that the Bucco and I don't know the other person's name have implemented, if our ordinance can supersede that ordinance, if it passes, then that would be, in my opinion, the only reason why we should have this ordinance, because we should protect our kids, because our health official said, well, there might be something. Did everyone read my op-ed 2.5 months ago in Morristown Green that said we should be going after the sellers? We sort of said we're sort of doing it. My friend Catherine sort of said, you know, step 1 should be this, step 2 should be that. I just can't believe that our very first ordinance in January of 2019 was an ordinance to punish children. I can't believe that there wasn't things that were more pressing than that. And going after the sellers, I saw some nodding heads or shaking heads of like, no, we can't do more. Other communities have done more. I'm totally in agreement that, because really, if to your point, our kids are saying it's here, but really it's there, it's probably still someplace in our broader community. And our community is so complex because we have three different towns that come into the high school, even though this really ordinance is really for Frelinghuysen. But in terms of cracking down, that really should be the focus, is the prevention, like Catherine said, the sellers. If you all can influence the state legislators, do that. Like, do that first. Do this in 2 years. I don't understand why, like I said, unless there's a state ordinance where this can supersede, I'm all for it. But otherwise, please, no thank you. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Jean Jabor, 412 Timber Drive, Morris Township. I'm very emotional about this topic, and I don't know how coherent I will be, and I'm going to try to make a couple points. But I don't know if you remember me calling you 2 years ago saying, what do you do? What do you do about this? And I'm sure you can relate to me. You protect your children, put them in car seats, make sure they have everything they need. And then suddenly, people are selling them drugs, basically, at 11, 12, and you feel helpless. Like, help us as parents to figure this out. Like, everybody is scrambling all over this country. The FDA is trying to say we should ban it completely. You know, they're trying to remove these flavors. They're trying to see what they can do. I've called pediatricians for years. I feel like I'm educating pediatricians. I'm educating, you know, professionals on what vaping is over the last 2 years. And it's just been disheartening. And I'm very appreciative that we're here today talking about this and trying to figure this out together, because it's been lonely and a helpless feeling. But I think that we need to start educating much younger, 3rd grade. They know what vaping is. They see it on ads. They hear it. They see it on Full House. They know what vaping is. It's not like we're teaching them something they don't know. By the time they get to middle school, they know all these facts. Like I heard someone say, I don't think they knew all these facts. They know it. They know all these facts. They don't care. They're invincible. Nothing. It's water vapor. What's going to happen? It's not going to happen to me. It's not going to happen to me in the next 10 years. Who cares? By that time, they're addicted. You know, and the whole, like, we are connected to Morristown in so many ways. We share sports, we share a high school, we share these stores that our kids are going to, and I hope that we're working closely with them because their stores are selling in droves. I've been at these stores, I've talked to them, I've stood outside them, I see the amount of kids going in there. It's disturbing, and I don't know, like maybe some of you have small children, but it's hard to imagine that this is happening so rapidly. And and the whole 18 to 20-year-olds being, subject to penalized legally, I do have a problem with it because we've been allowing these stores to sell to them for years, and they are addicted. I've talked to, Chief of Police in Morristown, it's in everyone's homes. Like, it's in your home. You can't stop it. And it's a helpless feeling. And then what? You think that if you take an alcoholic and say, if I catch you with a drink, you're going to jail, is that going to stop the alcoholic? No, they're going to keep drinking, but they'll do it more cagely. And that's what these kids are doing. That's why you have only one. They're not going to get caught again. They're going to be cagier about it, and they're going to hide it, and they're still doing it. So, I'm sorry. I'm just, I think I made all my points, but I just hope that we're working closely with Morristown because even though we only have I know for a fact that these Morristown stores are rampant. They're offering it to our kids. My son went in there and he asked them, did he want some at the age of 12? No, thank you. I just want this candy for the movies. That's not right. And we're allowing this to happen to our youth, and they're addicted, and then we penalize them at 18 now. And I'm not against them getting in trouble or stopping this, but I don't know that that's the answer.
Jean, thank you. I just think your most important point was saying help parents to figure this out. And I promise you that I will work with my colleagues in every way to try to come up with answers to something like that. We thank you.
Thank you.
And before you step down, Jean, before you step down, if you've seen it happening in Morristown, I mean, it is against the law, to sell to under 21. It's not just Morris Township, it is a state law that you can't sell to somebody below 21.
Yeah.
If you see it happening in Morristown, you should
you.
let the police know, but also
I
go
did.
to a council meeting and let the mayor know and let council know.
I probably should. But they said the same thing that was said here. You have to have children that are willing to go in and do the whole sting operation, and it's hard to get children to like, they didn't sell in front of me. I spoke to the man, and then I stayed in his store, and kids came in, and, hey, Joe, hey, do you have any other flavors? That's it today. Oh, I'll just take that then. Do you have your ID? Oh, yeah. Sorry, Joe, can't sell to you without an ID. Oh, okay. He walks out, and the guy looks at me, and I'm like, yeah. I don't believe a thing that just happened in front of me, and that kid wonders why he didn't get what he usually gets every day.
Right. So it is going to take a broader effort.
I feel like, and
I said that at the beginning. It's going to be a partnership with other communities. It's going to be a partnership with the school. It's one reason why we postponed any further action until May. We want to have those conversations. Tonight is the first conversation we've really had with the community out in front. But personally, from me being a parent, I have 2 kids. One kid, you could say something to him, threaten him, and he'll be like, bug off, Dad.
Right.
The other one, where you say, make a, I don't want to say a threat to him, but, threaten a punishment to him, and he gets all scared. Right? There's different kinds of kids.
Right.
And again, it's going to be a multifaceted solution to this problem. But in my mind, and I haven't made up my mind yet, I honestly haven't, but in my mind, if this ordinance could scare off 30% of the kids, 35% of the kids who are middle school from starting because they were afraid of the trouble they could get into, it helps. It's not the solution, but it helps us move us to where we need to be.
And anyone I talked to about this, I said, yes, this will help kids who have not started yet, 4th graders. But you go up the line, and kids that for a week have been doing it and are now addicted, so you've got kids from 12 to 21 that you're dealing with who are addicted, who we've allowed this to happen to. And
And
That's my big takeaway from tonight. I mean, we can't do this in a vacuum, and we need the addictive services,
And-
some partner who's
Right.
gonna help us with that.
And my kids are in private schools, public schools. No one's immune. It's everywhere. And it's, down to 5th grade and up. And if you ask any high schooler, they'll tell you it's rampant. Oh yeah, I walk into the bathroom. Oh yeah, it's everywhere. Kids turn around it's everywhere. And then I guess our kids that are not doing it are going in and ingesting the secondhand smoke of this. And I didn't realize that's what I learned tonight, that's bad too. Like, I didn't know that had that reaction, so.
Kathy, did you want to say something?
I just want to say, as I mentioned before, the officials who work in Morristown, the health officials, they're also my officials in another town that I work in, and I can assure you that they're on it. They're on it with everything they have. So hopefully we'll see some change. What I wanted to say also is, who brought up the health education? Very, very good point. We'll get on that. We'll make sure something happens with the health education this year. I think that is definitely something that we should put forth, and thank you very much for bringing it to our attention, and it's long overdue.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very much.
One other comment I should have made to Melissa when you were standing there. I did actually have a personal conversation with both the headmaster at Morristown Baird and the principal of the high school. And they're actually both welcoming of the effort we're trying to make. They have problems at their school just like every other school does. And Chief, if I could get back to you. When we talk about this affecting Frelinghuysen School the most, you said, and just for clarification, you said if you came across that at the school, or Lieutenant Gogolich, you'd refer it back to the school, right? At what point do you get involved? Do you ask the school to refer to you for further action if it's happening too much in the school?
Do you mind if I just make some clarifying statements?
Please, go ahead.
I certainly don't mean to be argumentative with anybody, and I've learned from, there's things that I didn't think of either, and just because I stand before you as the chief of police or the lieutenant of the police department, it doesn't mean we have all of it. We are trying, and we've identified this as a problem amongst umpteen other problems that we have as police officers that we have to deal with. So we do have a starting point. We're trying to get there. There were some very good points. I hope I didn't say something that suggested we were only going to address this with Frelinghuysen Middle School students. I think we use that as an example because that's where our school resource officer is, and that's who we have the memorandum of agreement with. The only other memorandum of agreement we have is with the Unity Charter School. So although we have good relationships with Del Barton and Del Wall and Morristown Pier School, we don't have memorandums of agreement for them. It's really the exchange of information. We do have a 5 or 6 man woman/woman community policing unit that we send into the other schools. So I'm not sure where that information came from or where the thought is that we don't go into our public schools because we do. We offer everything
You mean
we
the private
offer
schools,
to,
right? You go into the
to the private school. Anything we offer to Frelinghuysen, we offer to the public schools. I'm certainly not saying that they don't accept our help. Everybody gets what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to trick people again. The private schools. I'm certainly not trying to suggest that we don't have the warmest of welcome, but sometimes a private school behaves like a private school. So although we do have good relationships, sometimes they take what we have to offer, sometimes they don't. I hope nothing I said suggested that we're only going to go after Frelinghuysen Middle School students. We're not going to go after any students. Schools generally handle what they handle. At no point do I see us coming into Frelinghuysen Middle School and taking over, or any of the other private schools to take over. We're here for them to ask us for help. It is a cooperative effort. It's a cooperative effort with everything we deal with at the schools, not just vaping.
No, that answers the question, because the response I got from the headmaster of Morristown Baird, actually the high school principal, was it's an issue there, and they are glad to see that they can now turn to the police for help.
Absolutely.
And that was the response I got.
Absolutely.
And there are certain circumstances where he said he would.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, I don't think anything we've introduced with the juvenile is punitive. I think it was all educational basis. There was resources that we introduced it through the CEC that we're going to be able to refer our children out to deal with some of those things that they might have a problem coping with. It was all educational based, and I don't think there was anything punitive unless you're going to consider the potential of community service punitive, when again, it could be something that benefits the community. And I haven't watched police cars, but it might be something else that, maybe a couple of police cars, but, you know, something, again, I don't have all these answers. We've pretty much had 45 minutes of us talking. If we sat down for hours and hours, we could really convey what we've done. We may only have gone to the stores, the 8 stores in Morris Township twice, but I think that's terrific. And if it wasn't for you, we probably wouldn't have known it was a problem back then to even start. So I do thank you. We did immediately respond.
Mark
I hope
did.
I hope
I
you do
appreciate
feel that
that.
we did.
Mark, also remember that you went twice, and the health inspector goes twice. And that's part of her inspection, is making sure the signage is in place, speaking directly. And when I hear of an issue, which I have not heard of an issue in our town, but if I do, I tell the inspector, and then they get an extra inspection. So that's 2 more at least that
Great.
happen.
And thanks for pointing that out, because I didn't think of that.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. O'Reilly.
James O'Reilly, 50 Independence Way. Your last remarks addressed what I'm asking about. I have no knowledge of these issues, so I'm probably asking something that people have already considered and know a lot about. But I was going to ask about what can be done with the merchants who are selling this stuff. Now, I understand there are some laws in effect and you're able to go around and inspect them, and that there are fines in effect, and that's very good. And there may be things that can only be done on the state level, like they must be selling this stuff because they have such a good market or because they have a profit margin on it. So they could be more heavily taxed, I suppose. There are other things I have thought of, which I'm sure other people have thought of, which is like, I know there are, for some purposes, you can't engage in certain activities from a certain distance of a school. So what is going on in those areas?
I'm sorry, could you just clarify the question again?
Well, what is being done to affect the behavior or to penalize the merchants who sell this stuff? And I said, you already explained what you're doing
So
right now.
I can honestly tell you that as the police department, we've never taken any punitive action. Like, we've never discovered that there was a violation where we've seen it, because it has to occur in our presence. So really, basically what we could do is maybe introduce like an undercover, so to speak, but we can't employ juveniles to engage in anything that's undercover. If we went in there and like stood by to try and see what they're doing, of course they're gonna card and identify anybody to assure that they're over 21. So essentially we would need someone between that 18 age, that 18, 19, 20 to go in and try and purchase something, I'm sorry, not something, one of these, illegal devices that they're not supposed to sell under 21. So it's very difficult. That's why we go and we educate them and we engage in conversation with them and try to get them to cooperate with what the state law is and have them understand that these are the penalties. If there was, if the township committee does decide to adopt an ordinance as what Ms. Whitehead was talking about, there might be something more we could do, or even a deterrent if it's a high-priced, license, so to speak, that you have to renew every year to sell the devices. It's another fair, good question that unfortunately there's not much we can do. I'll loosely associate, let's just say, vaping with, the possession of cocaine. The distribution of cocaine is illegal. Do people still get their hands on it? They do. So even though the sale of vaping is illegal, juveniles or people under 21 are still getting their hands on
We need to address this from many different ways, not just the sellers, the possessors, through education, through maybe punitive punishment for those that are like of age, and then dealing with the juveniles. Another loose association is the opiate epidemic. They say, you know, any professional will say, you can't arrest ourselves out of this problem. We're never going to solve it by arrest. But everyone does agree that arresting someone is the first step of the process because it gets them into the system to either deal with their addictions, to get them into drug court. So having the police involved isn't necessarily always a bad thing. It doesn't always mean enforcement. Police officers are much more than what they were in the 70s and 80s. We're counselors, we're therapists, we're this and that and everything. Jack of all trades. It's not just writing tickets and running radar aimlessly. The police have very, very broad shoulders. It's a white collar. It's a very educated profession at this time. And we are trying. We're trying to address things outside of just enforcement.
And there are already ordinances, I suppose, against engaging certain kinds of activities within a certain distance of a school, right?
As far as vaping?
That doesn't, because vaping is anywhere anyway.
Possession of drugs, there is. There's
Yeah.
enhanced penalties for possession or distribution within the school zone.
Would it be helpful to extend that kind of legislation to vaping or not?
I guess we start with getting the ordinance and then see where we go from there.
And how about taxing the product? I don't suppose that falls within the power of the township. I suppose that would be something for the legislature to consider itself, concern itself with. Right, thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
O'Reilly.
Thank you, sir.
Just a quick comment, again, Rachel Linden at 35 Buckley Hill Road. It looks like a lot of onus and expense and backbreaking work and education is on the burden of the community and our municipality, which I heavily resent. That's not your problem. I mean, it's your problem, but it didn't start with you. It started with manufacturers, it moved down to distributors, and at the federal level, we need to be tracing these products so that we can have accountability and we can create liability. Sadly, it seems like the burden comes on the community when in reality, we should have a number on that vaping utensil. So when a minor is caught, we know where it came from. And so we can find it without ever having to do a sting or a bust or put more onus on our community. I mean, these are the kinds of things that I'm hoping we'll take back to Trenton and Trenton will take back to the federal level. But yeah, it's sad that our community has to be burdened with all this and that our police officers need to be doing other stuff, but this is, you know, super important for sure, but like look how much burden is on us, you know? So anyhow, thank you.
Thank you,
Good night.
ma'am.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're Rachel.
Lee Goldberg, 10 Arrowhead Road. First of all, thank you for all your presentations tonight and to the committee for informing us and educating on this issue. My first question is, could you just validate, and I want to make sure I understand the point that I guess Melissa Spiota made as well, and I thought I heard you allude to. So is it correct that if the state were to enact a state statute, this ordinance would supersede that?
Supersede wouldn't be the word, it would be a better option. So an officer has discretion to issue state statute or local ordinance, right? So if we're talking about disorderly conduct, there's a state statute for disorderly conduct, there's a local ordinance for disorderly conduct. As it pertains to this specific situation with vaping, it's in my opinion that it would be better to have the local ordinance as our means of addressing it rather than the state statute. Because the state statute doesn't, the way I read it, doesn't focus on education. It's a disorderly person's offense and there would be a fine.
Can I ask a question? Can a local ordinance supersede or trump?
Supersede isn't the right word, right? So if we're going to say one's going to supersede the other, state law will supersede the ordinance, but we would have the discretion as officers to issue local ordinance rather than state statute, unless part of the law was written that, you know, you can't write a local ordinance.
Excuse me for interrupting.
Thank you.
Can I ask a related question to that? I've heard varying information about what's in the state ordinance? I'm not 100% sure it's lit, is it? Or, I mean, I've
Let me
heard
see, I might
different
have it right
notions
now.
of what
Yeah,
the.
but I don't think you should go there, because it's not even in committee yet. It's just been a proposal, and it has to move through committee, move out of committee, then get negotiated with the Senate. It's a long process, and whatever you view today is not going to be what it's going to be coming out of committee. So,
I'm sorry?
Should have it.
What was
Information about
that? Oh, okay.
state ordinance.
while Chief is looking that up, do you have a question?
Absolutely. The page, I guess the third page on where it says, how will this local ordinance affect individuals? That's actually, with the bullet points there, are those just sort of guidelines? Those aren't actually going to be articulated in the ordinance itself.
Which page?
How will this local ordinance affect individuals? I guess it's on the last page. Sorry.
Yeah, page 5, okay.
So how we would address juvenile would be department policy, because juveniles can't be written to local ordinance. We could refer to the local ordinance as that's what was violated, so it's considered a delinquent act if it's by a juvenile, if the offense if it was by an adult. So that would be our department policy. Under the adult for 18 to 20, let's just say it would be issuance of a local ordinance, introduction into the municipal court system, and then that's the judge's decision how he assesses the penalty. So it's also local ordinance, the penalties for all local ordinance. So there was not one penalty decided for the underage possession of vaping products. It's had the same penalty for anything, whether the dog's unlicensed, your dog's loose, your dog fights someone urinates in public, someone's disorderly conduct, it's a local ordinance. It's the same range of penalties. I hope I'm explaining that right. But in speaking to Judge Troxel, he said he would certainly agree to the 50, 100, 150 marks.
Okay, because I get concerned when I see like in the second bullet point, the second offense, like language where it says, it ends with, and the possibility of community service. Like when I read this, I would think it would be cut and dry if we're sort of formalizing things. Like what would be the determining factor? Why it sounds arbitrary in terms of if this were enacted. Is that discretionary or is that?
It is, because it would be, that's a good question. So it would be under department policy how we handle it. So right now, if we're gonna give you an example of how we handle underage alcohol, actually, do you want to talk about how we handle the station house adjustments and the underage alcohol?
Sure. If there's a location in the township and there's numerous juveniles there and they've never had an offense before, we give them the option of the station house adjustment instead of the local ordinance. Because again, with juveniles, we preach education. They're humans, they're allowed to make mistakes, right? We all are. So what we do for a station house adjustment is we bring them in and we educate them. We show them like 30-minute presentation about the effects of alcohol, what the local ordinance actually means, what the penalties could be if it happens again, and then what could happen if once they're 18 if they're caught with underage possession of alcohol.
Thank you. And the last bullet point, where it says it's at the discretion of the Morris Township Police Department to refer any juvenile offenders to the CEC to assist with supervised community service. So is that the discretion of the township police based on first offense, second offense at any point in the process, or does a threshold have to be?
Yes, no, a threshold doesn't have to be. I mean, Jessica, we could certainly refer them to that agency on the first offense if it's determined that would be helpful. And I'm focusing more on the, not on the supervised community service, but more like the educational programs that the child can be introduced to. And again, a lot of it's coping skills, things like that.
Okay, thank you. And then my last question is, you mentioned that memorandum of understanding, was it memorandum of mutual memorandum of agreement with, you have that one of those with Frelinghuysen School?
Yes.
And
Well, it's with the school district.
It's with the school district, so it applies to all school,
Yes,
school,
all schools that are in the township of Morris. So they signed their own with Morristown, the schools that are in Morristown.
So because in this section here, we're speaking of the confidentiality of juveniles, which is obviously a paramount and important topic. Am I reading this correctly? Is that because you have a memorandum of understanding with school district schools, that it says the only exception to the confidentiality of a child or of a juvenile is if there's a mandatory notification to the juvenile school in accordance with the general guidelines of uniform memorandum of agreement?
Right, so the possession of tobacco products would not fall under that. There's certain things we have to inform the school of, whether if it's a violation that occurs on school property, a violation against like a teacher, if it involves the school. So there's certain things we have to, I can't rattle you off the top of my head, but certainly that tobacco is not one. If we did share the information with the school, it would only be for the school to assist us in a cooperative manner to address the problem.
Thank you. And then, not really a question, but a comment is, I guess to Mr. O'Reilly and Mrs. Spiota's point is that coming down harder on the people, the purveyors, the people that sell it. I know San Francisco, just 2 days ago, which is where Juul is based out of, introduced legislation to ban the sale of any e-cigarette devices or Juul, or the actual product itself. So it would seem to me that that might be a good stand to perhaps investigate and take as a township. I don't know if we could put it in an ordinance that would actually just ban the sale of it, which would sort of get to the heart of the problem, not the epidemic we see, but
It is a good idea, it's just unfortunate that everybody does it. Our kids that would go to Morris Township retail stores, they're just gonna go somewhere else to get it, and they'll still possess it.
Well,
You know what I mean? So, yeah, it's a start, I'm not.
No,
I'm not
yeah, it would be a start. I
disagreeing.
think it would also be maybe received as sort of a model sort of
I hope so,
activity
yeah.
and viewed upon as other localities to how to address that. So I would just ask that the township committee look at ways to really address cracking down on the retail sales and the purveyors of it and address it from that end as well. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Anybody else?
since I see no one else coming up, that we close the portion, the public portion of the comment.
Very good. Does anybody else have any other questions before we close it? No, seeing none, I will close the public portion. Before everybody goes, I wanted to ask the township committee members, if you'd like to comment now, you can withhold comments. I just wanted to offer that up. Any thoughts? Anybody want to go first? Or should we just go down the line and make Mark go first?
First, I want to thank all the residents for being here who provided input, and I think we all agree that tonight's session was very informative, and we all heard different points of view that I think all have, merit in terms of our discussion moving forward. Thank you, Chief and Lieutenant Globlich, for staying up here, and Ellie and all of our other partners who are here to present. One thing that I have been kind of thinking of since January and that was brought up several times is really working with our neighbors to see how we can do this as a local community, because like we said, it's not just Morris Township, it's Morristown and Morris Plains, and it could be Madison or any other town. And I think a regional approach, whether or not we have some sort of panel or discussion with other towns would be really important to have, just to get their feedback and their perspective. It was really interesting to know from the chief that having the list of vendors in Morris Township and knowing that I believe you said they haven't had any violations that they've that we've caught them in doing. I think that's important to know, and it's also important to know that we think that the prime suspects might be in a different town, which is really why we need a more regional approach. So thank you for the time. Thank you for everyone for staying here late and providing your input, and I really appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to working more with the Township Committee to improve the ordinance that we have.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I did a lot of reading and a lot of research and a lot of soul searching on this because I have 2 young grandchildren. Obviously, I passed the point of parenting children. But I'm very concerned about what I've learned tonight. I learned, number one, that a partnership with the parents is a very, very important thing. And also the partnership with Morristown and Morris Plains to try to coalesce our three communities, to bring them together, to give impetus to doing everything we can, number one with the kids, but number two with the purveyors. I think that whoever made that point is one of the most important points, because we have a homogeneous community, and people can work around that. But since it's so close and we're all in this area, I think, you know, the opportunity to do something there is great. I think the education, someone said to younger children, I think is a very, very critical and important thing. We can talk about this a lot, but people have to realize that there's something wrong. And this puts a little bit of the burden not on the community, not on the committees, but on the parents. The parents to be able to speak and educate their children and say, you know what, this is something that is wrong, is bad. We can get a lot of people to help you to understand what's really happening. And so I just think this has been very, very worthwhile for me, and I'm sure everybody else feels the same way. And obviously, this is not the end of this conversation. So thank you all.
Thank you. Mr. Arvanites?
Unfortunately, the only way that we stop this problem is if we cut off the arms that are feeding this addiction, and that is to stop the sale of any of these products in our country. If we don't do that, this problem will never go away. It's like when we spray for mosquitoes, they go away for a little bit, eventually they come back. I use an example that you can put a drug addict in my dad's village that's in a mountain in the middle of nowhere outside of Sparta, and if they want to find drugs, they're going to find it. So if someone's a Juul user or a vaping user, they want to find it, they're going to get it. So the only way we stop this is by cutting the arms that are feeding the addiction, and that's the only way. Otherwise, unfortunately, we're going to be dealing with this for a long time, and I don't know how to stop it other than just cutting it off.
Thank you. I would like to thank our police department for seeing a problem and suggesting a solution. And it's really sparked quite a discussion. I personally have received many emails, many phone calls, many personal discussions. There's a lot of considerations here, and I appreciate tonight the information that came out. I would like to see us get creative about going after the sellers. It never occurred to me that we could establish an ordinance banning the sale. That's a takeaway for me for tonight. The suggestion of establishing licensing fees. Did I misinterpret that?
I think the state has acted in the area so as to regulate the sale and the licensing of the seller, so it would probably be difficult for us to do that.
To actually ban the sales. We could,
Yeah, correct.
we could implement the licensing fee, but I don't think we could ban it.
That's to measure and get creative, come up with ways to make it. That's a good thing for us to do. I know I've learned a lot tonight. I'm sure there's other ideas out there, and I would like to see us, get creative about going after the sales. And I compliment our police on what you guys have done already in our town. There's clearly a need, I agree, the need for the partnership across the three towns on the sale aspect and, on the education aspect as well, because we're a regional school district. I would say also the 18 to 20-year-old, I am concerned about that as far as the penalties. And I know we've made the point that we have certain standard penalties on the books. I was looking through our code, there are certain actions that appear, to my opinion, to have their own penalties, and that would be another suggestion I would have. I appreciate the assurance from the judge of what the penalties would be, but I would prefer to have something in writing. And to have in writing the possibility of, even though I know it's unlikely, but to have in writing the possibility that someone 18 to 20 years old could get a $2,000 fine or serve up to 90 days in jail. To me, that's too harsh. And like I said, I realize it's unlikely, but I would prefer to change that language in the writing of our ordinance. So I learned a lot tonight too. I appreciate everyone coming out and good discussion. And we will be voting on this in May, correct?
Awesome. We're just going to take further action. It could be, further action could be to postpone it further if the body so chooses.
Thank you.
So I too would like to thank the public. It's almost 10 o'clock now and everybody stuck around, and I really appreciate that. Those of you who have spoken to me previously through campaigns, knocking on doors, all these years that I've been involved, I've always said that resident input is really, really important to me. So I thank everybody for giving me that resident input. There's a lot of takeaways that I got tonight, and I thank everybody for that. I am going to talk to our assemblymen about including flavors, banning flavors in the state of New Jersey. That's FDA guidance that came out a couple weeks ago. I'm going to recommend to our state assemblymen that they include that in their bill, and let's be the first state to do that. Yes, and the other takeaways are that, like I said, it has to be a multi-pronged approach, and that approach includes the learning I received tonight, that we have to have some addictive services in place in order to make this model work. That's really important. I think there should be some standardized learning that we could provide the community, not just our community, but there should be standardized learning possibly provided by the state, and we can turn to the state for help with that. But there should be standardized learning that goes down maybe to 3rd grade. Different kinds of learning, but some kind of standards that we should be teaching our kids in health class in all our schools across the state. And lastly, I want to comment, there's been a lot of talk about the sellers. Like I said earlier, marijuana is illegal and kids still get it. Cracking down on the sellers, it is one aspect of it, and we could try to make it harder. But like a lot of people have said, kids are going to find a way to get it. People who are addicted are going to find a way to get it. And it's just one aspect of the approach, and it has to be a multi-pronged approach. That includes us, the police department, but certainly the schools, certainly the parents, and certainly people like Ellie at Daytop. Thank you so much for all your learning tonight. It's going to take a lot of people focusing their efforts on the problem. This is not, what we're doing here is in no way an end-all to the problem. It's just a first step. One thing that I'm really glad about is that we've taken this first step and created this broader discussion, not only in the community, but in the state of New Jersey, because Assemblyman Bucco is the assemblyman for this district. He learned about what we're trying to do in Morris Township, and he took it to the state level. So it started a much broader conversation that's not just in Morris Township and Morristown. It started a conversation that's now spreading across the state of New Jersey. And that's a really good thing, because we need to get many, many people on board to tackle the problem. It is not just us here in Morris Township, believe me. I don't in no way think that what we're trying to do here is the end all, but we just want to be partners with everybody else. And we're going to have a couple months to figure it out. Come May, if we haven't figured it out yet, we'll push it to June or July. But we want to stay on this path and work with everybody to try to find the right solution for all of us. Like Melissa said, there's not a parent out there who is not concerned about their kids juuling. Everybody's in 100% agreement that it is a problem. The question is, how do we tackle it as a community? And that's what we're trying to do here. That's the effort of everybody involved here. It's really well-intentioned. It's not meant to penalize anybody, not meant to criminalize anybody. It's really to attack the epidemic, and it's a first step. But thank you again for everybody for coming out. Thanks everybody for your comments. Thank you, Chief, Lieutenant Ellie from Daytop, Kathy Whitehead, thank you, and thank you, Jim Lent from the local newspaper for reporting all this. We really appreciate that. Thanks again.
Recommend a round of
Applause for all our presenters tonight.
And if anybody does have a follow-up comment after tonight or wants to relay some comments in private, you know, all our email addresses are on the township website. Feel free to send an email to any and all of us. We can't reply all together, just so you know, we have to reply individually. But if you have any follow-up thoughts or any other things that you didn't want to say in public, feel free to send them to us. I'd welcome them. So thank you again. We'll take a 2-minute break so people who want to leave can leave, and we have a few more things to do on our agenda tonight.